Hello, everybody, and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. We're down a member today, but I'm Serge. Joining me, I have a Jer.
Hello.
A Ben.
Hello, yes, I am Wheeler.
But no Alex, because poor Alex has a cold. A reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Before we jump into our opening segment, I want to give you a heads up that on Saturday, February 2nd, we are going to be having the Highlander year-end event. So definitely come check that out. There's going to be lots of powerful magic. The North 100 crew is going to be doing some commentary, minus a Ben who's going to be actually battling. Yeah, so check that out. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but maybe a little bit of a sneak peek as to what you're going to see on that day.
Where will that be?
Oh, pardon me. The year end is going to be right here over at twitch.tv/LoadingReadyRun. So watch it here. Thank you, Beach. I suppose there could be a disconnect between humans on YouTube and humans on Twitch. So come watch. The replay will be on YouTube, though. All right, Ben, tell us about a card you think we're going to see this Saturday.
So
or next Saturday, February 2nd.
A little sample of what they might see, and my selection for the best card you're not playing is On-Crop Crasher. On-Crop Crasher is 3 mana, 2 and 1 red, for a 3/2 Minotaur Warrior with haste. That says you may exert On-Crop Crasher as it attacks. When you do, target creature can't block this turn. With exert being, I don't know, in paper magic
untap,
you take
turn it upside down or whatever.
Some way. Basically, it just says it doesn't untap during the next untap step, and because you're taking that choice, you get some added effect. This one being target creature can't block. So I'm selecting this because this card, not a car, although it hits like a truck, is locally one of the standout cards in aggressive decks, be the mono red, be it black red, Gruul, Boros, whatever kind of combination. If you are an aggressive deck with access to red, and especially the ones that have multiple Moxen or Llanowar Elves, whatever it may be, Mana Crypt,
some type of acceleration. Eh?
Yeah, this card, it joins the ranks of 3 drops in aggressive shells.
On paper, it doesn't look that exciting. Like, it looks fine. It looks like something you play in limited. Why has this made an impact in Highlander?
So the floor of just being an easy-to-cast 3-power haste creature is pretty good.
All right.
It's one of these things where you look at it, you see its 2 toughness, you see that, I mean, yes, it's a dummy that hits you.
Yeah.
And it dies to shock. And you kind of find it like, why am I playing this over, I don't know, cards like Fanatic of Xenagos.
Yeah.
A bigger haste creature. Or some of the mono red 3 drops.
Sulfuric Vortex or something.
Well,
like three. There's a lot of really powerful.
We're not cutting the vortex.
You're not cutting the vortex.
Yeah. But threes where cards need to have a big effect.
Right. There are a lot of red 3 drops that look really appealing, but ultimately you need to, for an aggressive deck, you want to keep that curve low. You want to use all of your spells if possible, and having too many 3s can clog up your hand. This card just pushes past that, as in a similar fashion as to it pushes past blockers to get through damage. It's like if you just drop this on turn 2 or turn 3 and you hit for 3, great. That's awesome. It did its job. And then next turn, you play another creature and maybe they've developed a bit of a board presence. Well, you exert. And that's pushing through not only an additional 3 damage from itself, but it's ensuring that your other creatures also get their damage through, which is huge.
It's one of the biggest issues with the red decks is that their creatures get outclassed very quickly, and this helps those creatures continue to be relevant into the late game. Even if they only get to attack once every 2 turns, it's still better than them just sitting there and not
being able to attack at all.
And you're providing an effect that you don't see on kind of individual cards. Like aggressive decks aren't going to play the cards that say like Falter. So cards that just say opponent's creatures can't block, that kind of stuff. But because it's tacked on to a creature that it's just going to be pushing through damage, it also just makes all your burn spells that much better, because it turns shocks that you might have to point at creatures on key turns into just going to the dome. And baby, I haven't even started on medium red. This one slides right into the mid-range decks, medium red, Mana Crypt decks. This card does everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something that Ben said earlier, but a lot of people overlook when they look at cards like this, is the 2 colorless in the mana cost. Something that especially 2-color red decks really struggle with is the mana. The mana is often really bad in those decks. You don't realize it until you try to build them, but like building, especially Boros or red-black, you often want double black on 2 or double white on 2 and double red on 2. And so having cards like this in your deck that are easy to cast no matter what really helps build those decks up.
The most important part about aggro decks, and especially the red aggro decks, is to make sure your cards do a thing. Which sounds really kind of just boring, but any turn where you don't have the utmost flexibility from your cards is going to lose you points. You are going to decrease your percentage chance to win that game. So if you have like 3 drops that are, red, colorless or whatnot, and you going into turn 4, you have a hand with 2 mountains, Mishra's Factory, and Mutavault, or Mishra's Factory Wasteland. You can't burn their creature and play your 3-drop, which is huge. It's something doesn't.
I got you there. Yeah, just the pip requirement.
Yeah, you want to play your spells. This card helps with that.
Word. All right, let's introduce today's theme. Today is part 2 of our Allegiance set review. Last week we did Wooburg, and we got quite a few comments, so thank you everybody who talked to us down there. Shout out to my favorite comment, WTF is the Shadow Realm. I like that one in particular. So just a reminder for our set reviews, this is not exhaustive. We only talk about the cards that we think are relevant to the format, either cards that we think will make a good impact or cards that we think are close enough that we'll talk about why we don't love them. Today we're going to be covering multicolor artifacts and lands. I think that's everything. And yeah, let's start with just a couple of cards from Wooburg that people brought up. And let us start with Unbreakable Formation. This is a 3-mana instant for 2 and a white. It says, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Addendum, if you cast the spell during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature, and they also gain vigilance. Jared, tell me about this card.
I actually meant to add this before the set review last week. I mentioned it to Ben right before the episode and forgot to do that. But it got mentioned in the comments, so that's great. Great reminder. I really like this card in go wide aggro decks and mid-range decks. They've been printing this exact mana cost, some variation of creatures you control get indestructible for a while now. This is, for me, is clearly the best one because the other ones you can't use at all proactively.
Right.
Whereas this one you can use proactively, which just makes it almost twice as flexible. It's in a matchup where you want to have the surprise, all my creatures get indestructible. It's still really great. But it's also just a pseudo anthem for your team. And if you're racing, giving your team, like antheming your team, giving those creatures indestructible and vigilance just means you're sending all your creatures into the red zone. Probably creates some tricky blocks for your opponent. If you have any combat tricks, it makes them way better. It just makes that combat step a nightmare for your opponent, and it's more difficult for them to get you on the crackbacks when you're racing. This card is great in either mode. Either you get to attack in, they make blocks, you make your creatures indestructible, their team dies, or you cast it beforehand, push more damage.
So I thought this card was hot garbage when I saw it, and I still am not entirely convinced. I am more partial to the Brave the Element effects, but I think I'm slowly getting convinced that this card is going to kill me, which is usually a good indicator of when something has, enough flexibility in the format. Like Jared said, it's not purely reactive. And I'm just terrified of this card with lifelink creatures, because that's a huge swing. This card,
baby. Oh, yeah.
It's much like in the same case of something like War Leader's Helix, where it looks a little unassuming at first glance.
But then you see that swing.
Well, you pair this with, exactly. You pair this with any lifelink creature, and that can be a point swing on the crack and the back of like 6 life, which is huge.
All right, let's move to our next card, Ministrant of Obligation. 3-mana, 2/1 human cleric for 2 and a white with Afterlife 2. When this creature dies, you get 2 1/1 white and black creature tokens with flying. Ben.
I think this card's bad.
All
I
right.
really don't like it.
I don't love it either.
A lot of people talked about this in the comments. Why?
Well, okay, so again, like we mentioned in the last episode, where there are going to be a bunch of these cards that look like they will function in an aristocrat's shell, which, yeah, this is a body that makes 2 more bodies, and the tokens that it poops out have flying, and that's great. But the thing is, this doesn't do anything for you. Like, it's not an upgrade to the already present 3-drop token makers or value creatures that you'll find in aristocrat shells. And it's like, it doesn't solve any problems that it has. So that's one of my big things when you come to look at new cards, especially for lists that are so tight, that are so like intricately woven like aristocrats, is that this card's not an upgrade, and it's not solving any problems the deck has. So why would I play it?
All right. Let's move on to the next card, Essence Capture. For blue, you get an instant that says counter target creature spell. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. Jer.
I don't love it. You might play it in like Flying Men or something, but yeah, I don't. It's Ben's area of expertise. I wouldn't, but. In Highlander, you just need your counter spells to be versatile answers, and this is not a versatile answer. Like, if you're playing you want to play this in a creature deck, and lots of the biggest problems for creature decks are not creatures. Like, they want to wrath you, or they want to play a moat, or they want to play an ensnaring bridge, or they want to play a demonic tutor, and this doesn't stop any of those things.
This card is so awkward when the top curve of a lot of decks involve planeswalkers. Or they involve like Armageddon or Natural Order, anything like that. And you'll be staring at this card and you'll be thinking, oh, why did I add this?
Not to mention it's really hard to cast.
Yeah.
Especially for creature decks, because creature decks are very rarely base blue.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our gold card. It's time for the news section. Thank you again for all of the viewer comments. Those were the 3 that really caught our eye there. First card we want to talk about, our first gold card, is Basilica Belle Haunt. For a white, black, you get a 3/4 spirit. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses a card, and you gain 3 life. And my stomach just moved. It was just like, hey, what's up?
Oh, it's okay. I understand. This is a lot of value to take all at once. So
Do you like this card?
I do, and I really wish I knew why, because this is so not my type of card.
It really isn't. I was like, sure, you put this on and it wasn't me.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even know if you like this card.
I don't like this card.
I actually like it.
Why do you like this card?
I just want a recurring nightmare, the ever-loving
Yeah, but
bejeebus out of people, and this is a good thing to recurring nightmare.
but versus what was the old Abzan one?
Siege Rhino?
Siege Rhino. Like, would you ever put this in over Siege Rhino?
Well, you play it with it, I imagine.
I mean, if you're just black-white, you play this over Siege Rhino.
All right.
I've played just black-white. You're not always Abzan.
All right.
But
It is very hard to cast, which is its biggest downside. If it was like white-black 2, I think I would actually play it. At this cost, I don't think I'm actually going to play it. But.
So like, it's worth mentioning, though, that if you were to play this in a 3-color deck, because already the mana cost is the biggest issue with this, and with this entire series. These cards come with a real cost that you might not be able to do this on 4 every single time.
Yes.
But if there's a 3rd color that will help enable that, it's going to be green.
Yes.
So instead of playing this over Siege Rhino, assuming you can cast both of them, play it with Siege Rhino and not run into any kind of issues, or hopefully not run into as many issues, be it, I don't know, wooded bastions saving the day when you just have like a basic forest or whatever it may be.
Yeah, or like you have like Noble Hierarch, Birds of Paradise, Elves of Deep Shadow, and Avacyn's Pilgrim that all help cast it and presumably get into the same deck.
All right. I wouldn't have played this, but I'm glad we talked about it.
Oh, I might go a year or 2
Before
I sleeve it up.
All right, well, let's talk about... Oh, and for those of you who are curious, the order of today's gold cards have been arranged lovingly by Wheeler in order of guild. So if you're trying to figure out the system that we're using today for organization, now you have it. So speaking of Orzhov cards that I think we'll see play, we'll see if my co-hosts agree, Ethereal Absolution, the card identified by LSV as being the single strongest card in Limited right now. 6 mana gets you an enchantment for 4, a white, and a black. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Creatures your opponent control get -1/-1, and for 2, a white and a black, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature, you get a 1/1 white and black spirit token with flying. Jer.
I don't think it's good enough.
Really?
It can potentially take over a really long game, but I think there's just like better things you can do on 6.
Mind if I do a little roll slop here?
All right,
Swap,
all right, all right.
swap.
Yeah.
Serge, why do you think this is playable? And where?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, you're right, what would I play this over? And typically 6-drop in a big deck like this, I'd be playing Staff of Nin, or one of the artifacts that draws you cards. It's generating an advantage.
Or like Elspeth's Sun's Champion.
Yeah, or even Sun Titan if you're looking to generate card advantage.
And now you don't know where I stand on this currently.
Correct. I don't know where you stand on this. I would want to give this a try in like white-black control or a big white-black deck, but it's going to be hard to play over one of the card-drawing 6-drops.
I think this card might be fine in Abzan Enchantress. It's pretty good with Humilities. It's getting to 6 in a deck with Utopia Sprawls, Trace of Abundance, Fertile Ground,
Humility in
Sarasanctum.
this?
Like,
It's a win con. It flies over their moat, your moat.
I'm also, I mean, people are probably sick of hearing, like, this card's good because your things get bigger, their things get smaller.
Well,
It's
yeah.
not just a one-stat change, but, I mean, that's it. This card is brutal if you've had to play it against Limited. My condolences. It's expensive, but I think it's good enough in a deck that can justify playing some pretty weird cards.
The hard thing about this is if you're playing against not a creature deck, this card does nothing. It doesn't.
No.
It's 6 mana.
And not graveyard.
And yeah, I mean, you might be able to exile the occasional card out of their graveyard, but the issue with this is if they don't have creatures, it doesn't generate you any creatures to win. If you're the Enchantress deck, you don't care about your creatures because your Enchantresses do nothing.
But if you're an Abzan Enchantress deck, realistically, how often are you going to feel favored in a matchup against blue decks? So, like...
Tough but fair.
And I think the exile part is actually quite relevant.
Before or after Chains of
think so,
Mephistopheles results?
Okay, well, bust out the spreadsheet.
All right, we'll follow this path. All right, so opinions are mixed, leaning towards negative. Next up, we have Final Payment. A white and a black instant. Final Payment is a white and a black instant. As an additional cost, pay 5 life or sack a creature, destroy target creature.
Or enchantment.
You can also sack an enchantment.
I didn't even see that.
Me neither. I never read those
played
two
against
words.
this card all weekend.
You can
but I
sack an
haven't seen it.
enchantment?
Yeah.
Why?
If you want to.
Huh.
Cool.
I literally never saw that. Yeah. Jared, what do you think about this? A lot of people asking about Final Payment are thinking about Aristocrats. Isn't this great? It's another sack outlet.
Negative.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to cast. You'd rather not sack a creature even in Aristocrats. You'd rather, like, just kill their thing and use one of your on-board repeatable sack outlets to sack your things when you want to.
Yeah.
Like, one-shot sack outlets in Aristocrats are not as valuable as people think they are. You really only want to start sacking your things when you have enough, you're going to have enough Blood Artist triggers to kill them. Otherwise, you always want your things in play, just making their removal spells look super goofy.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Next up, let's move on to the Imperious Oligarch. 2 mana, 2/1 for a white and a black gets you a human cleric with vigilance and Afterlife 1. Wheeler.
I mean, we've seen so many of these cards in this set and in the history of Magic. And actually, Jeremy and I were talking about this exact style of card before we started recording, where you would just rather have stuff like Butcher School.
Yep.
Yeah, like another card we forgot to really touch on is basically the other version of this card.
The 1/2 Death Touch.
Yeah, Orzhov and
That also has
Enforcer.
Afterlife.
Yeah, But I think you could actually just group them together when talking about this card to say, again, this isn't what Aristocrats is looking for.
Sure.
These cards aren't upgrades to what you already have for things that replace themselves. Now, a 1/2 flyer, whether or not that's better than a 2/1 Vigilance, it probably is.
1/2 Death Touch. Not
Or
flyer.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, 1/1 flyer. This card
Sure.
in particular. But even for the Death Toucher one, it's
For what it's worth, I think this one's the best one.
Really?
out of them. Yeah.
I think I'd rather play Enforcer. If somebody forced me, pun not intended, to play one of the two, I would rather play Enforcer, but ultimately I'd rather just play neither.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little biased, I like a good boar, but I'd rather just have Brindle Shoat, you know?
All right.
MVP.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to a card that Jer can't escape. Kaeas Usurper. This is the Planeswalker. This is a new Kaeas, which is very exciting. So for 3 mana, for 1, a white and a black, you get a 3 loyalty Kaeas Planeswalker. Kaeas or Kaeas?
Kaeas.
Yeah.
Does she have a lightsaber dagger?
Yeah, that's her ghost-killing blade.
All right, don't even worry about it. +1, exile up to 2 cards from a single graveyard. You gain 2 life if at least one of them was a creature. -1, exile target non-land permanent with CMC 1 or less. -5, Kaeas deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards that player owns in exile, and you gain that much life. Jer, you've opened 5 of these so far. You must have strong opinions.
Sure have. And then I opened one in Arena.
How?
This morning.
I thought you opened 3 in
How did you do that?
Well, I opened one in my first 2 sealed events. Then I opened 2 in Two-Headed Giant. Having played none of them so far, still didn't play any. And then I went home, and my girlfriend opened 10 of my packs, and the last pack had Kaeas number 5.
The look on your face and Jordan's face, because I sat next to you guys opening your 2HG pool when you opened a Kaeas and Jordan opened a Kaeas. Oh,
So it must feel good. You've opened all of these mythic planeswalkers. What are your thoughts?
I don't think she's playable in Limited or Highlander personally, but some people whose opinions I respect, including somebody on the other end of this table, seems to think they are playable. I'll give you someone else's reasoning who I've talked to. So their reasoning is that the +1 or the -1 is going to be good almost every time. Like either there's going to be like cheap artifacts or creatures to exile, or the deck will care about the graveyard. And so eventually it's just a threat that's going to speed up your clock. I personally don't think it does enough while it's in play to merit inclusion, but I'll ship it over to Ben.
Ben, how do you feel about this card?
I mean, that's pretty. I actually like this card.
In what deck versus which deck? So where does this have a home?
If I were to slot this into an individual deck, I would probably look to 3 potential archetypes.
Okay.
One of them would be, I guess, 4. Or not Orzhov. Mardu or 4-color Blood are the 2 big ones out in front. Again, 3 mana planeswalkers are super hard to evaluate. I think this card, unless they're like absolutely busted, like Liliana the Last Hope. I think this card is kind of in this line of Ashiok and the 3 mana Duretti, where their abilities seem kind of underwhelming, and there will be points in which they don't do anything.
Yeah.
But Kaeas is a little more flexible, in my opinion. She trades the like blowout potential that Duretti and Ashiok have with just being a lot more medium to medium good, in that exiling cards is always relevant. Every single deck in this format uses the graveyard, save maybe Death
Medium
and Taxes or medium red. Yeah. So if you're looking for a heavy D&T, I wouldn't sleeve this up for the year end, because that's all it's going to be. But we'll get to that later. But there are very few decks in which the +1 ability is not relevant. The -1 ability, people see and they're like, oh, it only hits 1 or less and non-land? Why am I doing this? But like being able to kill off mana dorks that people, and Moxen, cards that people plot their whole turns and future turns around. Getting something...
Yeah, but like, 3 mana Planeswalker kill your Arbor Elf isn't exactly the spiciest turn in Magic, right?
No, it's not. But and I think that's why there's such a conflicting opinion on this card, is because it just happens to be a Planeswalker, but it's not a clickbaity Planeswalker. Like, it's not like 10 out of 10, Kaeya will ruin it, or like, oh, this card is hot garbage,
top 10
unplayable.
Kaeya's going to break standards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So I think the reason I don't like it is because her -1 is typically going after mana producing things. And
those times you get that Bone Splitter, though.
And
Relevant.
Like, yeah, she hits Skull Clamp. That's good.
Relevant. Aether Vial.
But if you're trying to hit a mana producing thing, they've already had it in play for like 1 to 2 turns. So they've already got value out of it. They're probably already other things are on board. So like, I just don't know how often you're going to be able to play her, trade with a dork, and then die to the thing that the dork powered out. And then, like, I just don't know if you're ever happy with that scenario.
We are going to have to move on from this, though. We can't spend too much time talking about Kaeya.
Oh, I'll spend...
I know. We could talk about it forever.
Look forward for the Kaeya specific episode.
Yeah. We'll come up with episode 61 will be Kaeya. All right, speaking of Kaeya, next up we have Kaea's Wrath. 4 mana sorcery, white, black, Wrath. But you also gain life equal to the number of creatures you control that were destroyed this way. I'll throw to Jer again.
People don't really play Day of Judgment anymore. I think I'd almost always play Day of Judgment over this because it's much easier to cast.
All right. Next up, we have Mortify. 3 mana instant for 1 a white and a black. Destroy target creature or enchantment. Ben.
Mortify doesn't see a huge amount of play in our format, and that might mostly be about the color restriction that it presents. And because rarely are you going to see just a white-black deck. And the white-black decks that you do see don't necessarily want to commit to a 3 mana removal spell. So if they are adding their 3rd color, then they get access to blue, and then you're just rather going to dedicate this slot to counterspells or the strong white-black removal. You add red, you get Kolaghan's Command, Abrade, all that. Green, you get Abrupt Decays. So.
I actually think the bigger issue is that, like, if you're playing white-black, you'd rather just play, like, Council's Judgment, Vindicate, Ambush Making, the things that just kill anything.
Or even Oblivion Ring.
I don't think it's comparable to Oblivion.
I'm not
Super
super hot on any of those type of cards, frankly.
This card has a lot of different artwork because it's from a lot of different sets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking as the guy who knows nothing about this, so in Highlander, can you play multiple copies of this from multiple sets?
No.
It's all, okay.
It's all based on the name of the card.
Cool, thank you.
Mortify was printed multiple times, but they're all still Mortify. Okay. Yeah, nice check, though. All right, let's move on. Next up, we have the poor Pitiless Pontiff. Poor little buddy. You get a 2/2 Vampire Cleric for a white and a black. Pay 1 and sack another creature. It gains Death Touch and Indestructible. Wheeler.
Best art in the set. That is my hard call on this card.
Next card.
But yeah, the application on this card, people see a 2-drop sack outlet, but like, if you are going to have a sack outlet where you actually have to pay mana to sacrifice creatures, which I would just recommend not having that, then you can turn to Eiley,
She's the floor.
the Pilgrim.
That's the worst one you can play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And she's way better than this.
great art though, just great art.
Next up, we have Serif of the Scales, 4 mana Angel. For 2 and a white and a black, you get a 4/3 with Flying. Activated ability for white, gains Vigilance until end of turn. Pay a black, gains Death Touch until end of turn, and Afterlife 2, so if it dies, you get 2 1/1 Flying Spirit tokens. Jer.
I actually don't think this card's good enough.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of exile removal in the format, and that makes it look kind of silly. Gets outclassed by a bunch of the flyers that already get played. Like, a bunch of the flyers are 5/5s. It doesn't, like, I don't think the 2 abilities are super relevant. The Vigilance is sometimes relevant. I guess if there's bigger flyers, Death Touch might be relevant, but a bunch of the bigger flyers have First Strike or other good abilities. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it, but...
Fair enough. And I think this is the last Orzhov card. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to go with yes. We have Teysa Karlov. That one's also Orzhov?
Yeah.
Second last Orzhov card. Teysa gets you a 4 mana 2/4 Legendary Human Advisor for 2 a white and a black. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control, You get 2 of those. Or you get an additional one, pardon me. Creature tokens you control also have vigilance and lifelink. Ben.
I'm probably higher on this card initially than other people that have played aristocrats. For tough, it is a legendary creature that technically doesn't do something as soon as it hits the battlefield. But
I think you can give it. It does something immediately.
yeah, it will have something.
Yeah.
Being 4 toughness is great.
Yep.
Again, vigilance and lifelink really makes trading trading against aristocrats was already hard. Trying to race them just because their burst damage is so unpredictable, and can go from 0 to 100 by just drawing any 2-drop card from their deck, which is kind of awkward.
Oh, you're dead now.
Yeah, it's like,
what?
oh, haha, oops, blood artist. And so, I like the stats, the fact that she plays around Kaeas, and the ability being relevant. And that deck can get to 4. The downside is that I don't know how necessary this is.
Yeah,
this
it kind of feels win more.
It does upgrade. So one of the reasons why I'm willing to give this a consideration is that it's providing something the deck hasn't had before with good enough stats, and it can be seen, I see it as an upgrade to some of the 4-drops that you could play, at least when it comes from a synergy perspective, but not from raw stats. This card. Well,
Let's let Jaren. Yeah.
well, I was just going to say, this card seems more like an aristocrats card than something like Garruk Wildspeaker.
Yeah.
But Garruk Wildspeaker is just a better overall card.
Yeah. My issue with this card is something you were touching on earlier, is that I don't think it helps the problem that aristocrats has. This is a card that helps you grind better against mid-range aggro and control, and that's the aristocrats' bread and butter. It's aristocrats needs more disruption for combo. That's basically it.
Yeah, my assessment is I would want to try it out, but if you asked me in 6 months, I was like, oh no, yeah, that card got cut week 1. Don't be too shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This will win you games where you didn't quite have enough, but
So
when you play, yeah, but if you play 100 games, is it going to help you edge out that many games? I think that's sort of where we come as a team. Is it's going to be good, but in the long run, will it do enough?
It definitely does things.
Yeah. All right, let's go now to our last Orzhov card, question mark?
Yes.
We have Revival Revenge. All right. Revival is a 2-mana sorcery for Orzhov Hybrid. Return target creature card with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to play. Or Revenge, 6-mana sorcery for 4, a white and a black. Double your life total. Target opponent loses half their life, rounded up. Jer.
This is almost not a split card. It's basically just Revival, which is another unearthed.
Revenge?
It's kind of playable because you can play it in just a white deck, which is kind of exciting. That's definitely something that white-green midrange, an effect that white-green midrange would be looking for. Your 2s and 3s in that deck are so good and getting lots of them have ETBs, so getting to rebuy them is huge.
Even white-blue.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, being able to return everything from Vendilion Click to...
Well, yeah, and we were playing Ojutai's Command and Jeskai for quite a bit, and anytime we'd come and talk to each other oh, have you used the return creature mode on Ojutai's Command yet? We're just going off on stories about that.
You just remind me of a good future powerful Magic story, but please continue.
There you go, see. Yeah, it's just Revival. If you're casting Revenge, it's either going very poorly or very well, and it likely won't matter either way.
All right, let's move on to our first Rakdos card, Bedevil, probably one of the spicier cards. Instant for black, and a red. Destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Yes, your wheeler.
I don't know how necessary this card is for decks that are able to muster up the mana to cast this. It's very the flexibility is there for sure, but if you ask Grixis pilots or Jund pilots, do you struggle with killing artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers? They'll probably say no.
I mean, planeswalkers sometimes.
Yeah, planeswalkers can be an issue for the more controlling kind of shells, the blue ones. So I don't want to count this card out. I will definitely be playing with it because, great art.
This is my pick for best art in the set.
Really?
I love this art.
Going after the Canadian boy, Seb McKinnon there.
I'm a partner, sue me.
But yeah, there's a lot to it, so I wouldn't discount it. I don't know how into it I am right now, but ask me after I've lost to it a couple of times.
All right. Next up, Fireblade Artist. 2 mana 2/2 for red and a black, or black and a red technically, gets you a human shaman with haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sack a creature. When you do, it deals 2 damage to an opponent or a planeswalker. Jer.
Better ship this one to Ben.
I think this card is so scary to me. Like being able to also just, the era where you're shipping aggressive cards to me feels really awkward.
It is.
What timeline are we in? So this like being a 2-drop 2/2 with haste, as like minimal as it sounds, this type of effect has seen play in our format.
Yep.
Just being a 2-drop with haste, great.
Like Ash's Zealot.
Yeah, exactly. Rip Clan Crasher, like literally just 2 mana 2/2 haste. So that is fine. That's great. And then this ability providing reach, being able to clock out planeswalkers if you need to, going around creatures that might act as road bumps, big life linkers, whatever it may be. I mean, when they attack, you're a little bit, that's a different story. But and also being able to sacrifice itself. So if you play this, hit for 2, and you're like, well, my creature's outclassed.
Doesn't do anything.
Time to go to upstairs.
Yeah.
You've paid 2 mana to deal 4 damage, and that's pretty all right in my books.
Yeah.
My only downside with this card is it's Rakdos. That's it.
What would you want it to be? Gruul?
Well, I mean, flavor-wise, Rakdos makes 100%.
Yeah.
But like, if this card were Gruul, I think people would be putting this in like top 5 cards of the set.
I agree.
Interesting. All right, next up, we have the Hackrobat, which is hard to say. 3 mana, white and a Rakdos, gets you a 2/3 human rogue, but it has Spectacle, so if you've done damage, you can cast it for just a black and a red. Pay a black, gains Death Touch until end of turn. Pay a red, and it becomes a 4/1 until end of turn. I'll just throw this one to Ben.
So again,
Go on.
so
Assuming you get Spectacle every turn.
yeah, I've always kind of pushed Rakdos as why would you do this? And I've spoken a lot with the red pilots locally, like who all in their heart of hearts want Rakdos to be a thing that they can realistically sleeve up at the highest level of competition that we have.
Yeah, get rid of the beef of green and add some of the disruption of black.
Yeah, but why would you want to do that? And I think
Does this card get you there?
well, this is not this card by itself, but I think this card adds on to a series of cards that you'll see from this set and that hopefully we'll see moving forward to give some to add to a trickier element. So one of the things that Gruul aggro can get away with is that their creatures are a bit bigger, so it's more like their Tarmogoyfs, right, can trade with other threats mid-range decks are developing, but they also get pump spells. So like it's so scary when a Gruul deck just attacks and they haven't tapped any mana, because there's going to be a million Colossal Mights coming.
Yeah.
So providing something with this where you add that element of unpredictability as well as, I'm going to call this a 2-drop, a good 2-drop, I think is worth, giving it a shot.
All right. Next up, we have Judith, the Scourge Diva. 3 mana 2/2 legendary human shaman for 1 and a Rakdos. Other creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever a non-token creature, so relevant non-token creature control, dies, Judith will deal 1 damage to any target. Jer.
This is the Aristocrats card everyone should be talking about.
Yeah.
This card is slam dunk, auto-include in every Aristocrats deck that can cast her, which is everyone except Abzan, and then you should just splash red for this and Goblin Bombardment. This card is great. She makes your derpy creatures better at attacking, which is everything you want in that deck. You just want to be able to ship your whole team every turn anyways. She's a blood artist for most of your creatures. Doesn't get the tokens on the way back, but she still pumps the tokens. That's great. The only downside is she's only a 2/2, and she's going to die to the first removal spell your opponents draw every single time. But you're still going to win a lot of games with her.
Nice. All right, next up, we have the Rakdos Firewheeler. Haha. So for a black, red, you get a 4/3 human rogue wheeler. When it enters the battlefield, deal 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Ben.
It pains me to say that I don't know if this card is actually playable in our format. But
It's
a lot
not
of people,
a better FTK?
No.
But
God,
it's
no.
just worth bringing up the question because that would be a comparison, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was added to our list, not just for the name, but also because people were speaking on this. I don't think it's as bad as some people are kind of labeling it as. It's just, what deck does this get into?
Recurring Nightmare.
Red,
Oh.
Yeah, red-black mid-range with Recurring Nightmare. I've played it. It happened.
Yeah, but we've played everything. Like, this card, I just am not convinced that this card beats out the other 4-drops that you would slot to get rid of something in the way. Because this only gets rid of a...
Small thing.
Yeah, killing off a planeswalker is really nice. But again, black-red isn't struggling for cards to get rid of planeswalkers.
Like for example, last night, my opponent had a Scavenging Ooze, which was a 4/4, and they were tapped out, and a Woolly Thoktar in play. And I got to play Flame Tongue Kavu, kill the Scavenging Ooze, and then trade with the Woolly Thoktar. And this card does not do that.
All right. All right. Then let's move on. Speaking of big Rakdos cards, how about we talk about Rakdos themselves, the Showstopper. 6 mana, 6/6 for 4, a black and a red, gets you a legendary demon, flying trample, and when it enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, devil, or imp. Notable, somebody actually sided in an imp against me to play against my Rakdos. Destroy each creature whose
flex.
coin flip comes up tails. Jer. Rakdos,
I guess you
Recurring
could
Nightmare.
play this. No. I guess you could play this in like big red-black, which is a deck. You would probably play it in that deck. I don't think you would play it in any other deck.
All right. Let's talk about Theater of Horrors. 3 mana enchantment. Oh, pardon me, Beej. Let me see what I could do off the top of my head. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card off your library. Spectacle, if an opponent has lost life this turn.
It doesn't say spectacle.
Damn. During your turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, you may play cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. For 3 and a red, Theater of Horror deals 1 damage to any opponent or planeswalker. That was pretty close. Ben, what do you think of Theater of Horrors?
It's a very powerful effect. Being able to provide the reach to the pinging is great. Being able to play any cards, so this is lands, and it's not just for the turn in which you exile them, so it's not like an outpost siege effect. Yeah. It's more akin to like a Phyrexian Arena, except it's easier to cast. The cards aren't in your hand and susceptible to discard. And the only downside is that you have to, in your Rakdos deck, deal damage to your opponent during your turn. And if you can't, for whatever reason you can't, you can always ping them. Or a planeswalker. Why does this say or a planeswalker?
I don't know. I think this card's really spicy.
The card's great.
I think this card's really good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let us move on now to Gruul. And to start things off, let's talk about an interesting enchantment called Cinder Vines. So for a red and a green, you get an enchantment that says, make target wheeler leave the podcast. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cinder Vine deals 1 damage to that player. Pay 1 and sack it, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and just because we're mean, Cinder Vine will also deal 2 damage to that permanent's controller. Jer.
Yep, I'll take this one. This card's very good. If you're ever considering playing Destructive Revelry again, don't instant play this card. It's going to sit there and play. It's going to win you games versus blue decks. Just with the first ability alone, they're eventually going to spell themselves out of the game. Just like Highlander decks have, like, there are many decks that just try to cast as many, like Xerox style decks that try to cast as many cantrips as possible, and this just punishes that style of effect very appropriately. Not to mention, it gives you good combo protection, being able to blow up artifacts or enchantments. This card's great. If you ever play against Ben, just mulligan for this card, you'll probably win.
I want to address the play design team, because Night of Autumn, I understand. It's a great card, it's fun, it's flexible. And I apologized for whatever I did. If I hurt you guys in any way, shape, or form, I don't, please stop. Please, I have a family.
All right. Next up, we have another Planeswalker. Let's introduce our new Domri, the Chaos Bringer. 4 mana gets you a 5 loyalty Domri Planeswalker, +1, add a red or a green. If that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains Riot. -3, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards. From amongst them, put them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and -8, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of each end step, get a 4/4 red and green beast token with trample. Jer.
This card's very good. I like it. It's good in mid-range decks. It's probably good enough for Hoof as well, I think. It makes mana, gets you card advantage. Its ultimate wins you the game. I really like it. I think Riot is easily the best new keyword ability for Highlander. Just the threat of all, like this and Rhythm of the Wild, just giving the threat of every creature in your deck having haste just pivots the game into such a different place in so many matchups. It's so, people don't realize how big a deal that is.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Next up, we have the Gruul Spellbreaker. 3 mana for 1 red and a green gets you a 3/3 Ogre Warrior with Riot. Also has Trample, and as long as it's your turn, you and Gruul Spellbreaker have Hexproof. Ben.
Me Gruul, me Smash, big fist, go fast, no settle wreckage on me.
Smash.
Smash, die, smash.
Trample.
Big boy, trample. Quite
right.
good. Quite good.
All right, well then next up we have Nikia of the Old Ways. 5 mana 5/5, 3 red and a green gets you a legendary Centaur Druid. You can't cast non-creature spells. However, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Jer.
It was so close. Heartbeat decks almost exclusively want to cast non-creature spells, and for that reason, this one's a no from me, dog.
It's only a one-sided heartbeat, though. It doesn't help your opponent.
Yeah, but like,
Poundcon's a creature.
there's only so many creatures you want to cast with Heartbeat in play.
Great Whale's
And
a
then
creature.
you need to build your deck in such a fashion that that's good.
Yeah.
We got Cloud of
It's like, this card's a 5/5 for 5, so maybe if you're just like in like red-green ramp with like Eldrazi and stuff, then maybe it's good enough in that deck. I've played that deck a bunch. Sure, maybe it's good enough in that deck.
I don't think so.
Zakama.
All right.
But you still want to play a bunch of
Oh,
non-creature
Zakama.
spells.
Zakama. So you know you're on my side.
No, he's not.
Oh.
Zakama. You had me at Zakama, but only Zakama. Next up, we have the Ravager Worm. 5 mana, 6 mana for 3 red, green gets you a 4/5 worm with Riot. When it enters the battlefield, you also get to choose one of the following: fight target creature you don't control, destroy target land with an activated ability that isn't a mana ability. I kind of wish it just stopped at destroy target land. Jerry, you added this. Tell me about this card.
I really like this card. It's got a lot of flexibility. It's basically got 4 modes, because Riot has 2 modes, and then it has 2 other modes. So it's just so flexible. When you want to destroy the land, it's going to be a big deal.
But it doesn't destroy Academy or Caracas.
Yeah, but it destroys Maze of Ith and a flipped search for Azcanta.
It does destroy Caracas.
Yes. Caracas has return.
Right. Sorry, it just doesn't destroy. It doesn't destroy.
This doesn't really care about Caracas,
Academy
but
or Cradle.
It does destroy Manamo and Deserted Temple, which can cause Academy decks to really pop
destroys,
All right,
destroys
all right.
Inventor Sphere.
So it does enough.
I think so. It's another thing that comes in with haste as well. Just a big doofus.
All right.
If there's a problem creature, it probably kills it.
Well, let's talk about a card that we've already mentioned a couple times. Rhythm of the Wild. 3 mana enchantment for 1 red and a green. Creature spells you control can't be countered. Non-token creatures you control have Riot. Ben.
I'm not actually very high on this card. Fires the Avimaya. This is better than Fires.
Yeah.
But Fires doesn't see any play.
Correct.
And in red-green decks, be them aggressive or mid-range, or even something like Hoof, going as high as Hoof, I would just rather spend this mana playing, I don't know, an on-crop crasher.
Sure.
Or playing
Gruul Spellbreak.
See, this
Gruul
was
Spellbreak.
This was my thought on this card as well. Was does it do enough to give up your third turn? Obviously, there's a lot of words on there which are great, but does an aggressive deck want to take turn 3 off to play this? Jer, your thoughts?
I like this more than Ben, but not as much as some people. I think this is a meta card. If you have a bunch of blue decks running around in your meta, I think you can play this in like a Planeswalker-esque slot, because lots of times if this resolves against a blue deck, they just lose.
But
They're going to die.
as a Gruul deck, are you struggling? How often do you find yourself struggling against blue decks? Like,
I think Gruul versus blue midrange is like very close. I don't think Gruul is that favored.
Really?
Like Gruul versus Jeskai, I think Jeskai's favored.
I think Jeskai is favored in most things, but
Well, exactly. But if they play this, Jeskai is less favored than they were before this resolved.
All right. Moving on, we have the Cinder Shaman. Cinder Shaman is a 4-mana 5/5, except that 4 mana costs you red, red, green, green. You get a giant shaman, just a big old boy. Cinder Shaman can't be blocked by more than one creature. When it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment they control. Jer.
I think this card needed evasion. It doesn't have evasion. I don't foresee casting this card.
Ben.
that's a giant shaman.
All right. Moving on, we have the Zerta Goblin. It's a giant shaman.
It's a giant
Red
shaman.
green 2/2 with Riot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a red-green 2/2 with Riot. That's also a goblin. Jer.
This card's great. Play it in all your aggro decks. It has Riot.
Riveting.
That
Awesome.
mechanic's great.
Now, our last Gruul card, we have Collision Colossus. Collision is an instant, deals 6 damage to target creature with flying for 1 and a green-red hybrid. And Colossus costs you a red and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +4/+2 and trample until end of turn. Who am I throwing to? Jer.
I feel like I've got like the last 4.
Ben.
I mean, I could have taken a step off of Gruul. This guild is quite hateful towards me, but I think this is another card that should rightfully be close to like the top 5 cards of the set, but people won't talk about it just because it's so like
Innocuous.
it's kind of
I'm
boring.
gonna die to this
but
card
it's
a lot.
so good.
I'm gonna die so many times to this
Colossal
card.
Might is a card that players will like. They won't think about it, but they sure as hell immediately respect it after they get killed by it. And being able to have main deck anti-flying that is red or green, like oh,
So
that's
easy to cast.
that's a lovely Baneslayer angel you have, or a Thundermaw help.
Or
Yeah.
like, if you slam a Consecrated Sphinx against Gruul, the last thing you think they're gonna do is kill it.
Yeah.
Oh my
Especially
God,
before
right?
you get to draw
For
cards.
2 at instant speed.
So when your Gruul aggro opponent is like upkeep after you tapped out 6 for your Consecrated Sphinx and just smash it out of the air,
Wow.
it's almost as bad as the time Ben got its swords against Pod.
Oh god. I've
All right,
now.
let's move on to Simic. Our first Simic card we're going to talk about is the Frilled Mystic. Green, green, blue, blue. Gets you a 3/2 Elf Lizard Wizard. It has Flash, and when it enters a battlefield, you may counter target spell. Jer.
This is harder to cast than Mystic Snake, and Mystic Snake doesn't really see play. Not worth it for the extra 1 power.
All right. Next up, we have Growth.
It's a wizard. I think not too much, but I do think that card is a bit better than Mystic Snake.
Okay.
And being a wizard is a relevant creature type for the decks that would.
I guess if you're planning to Riptide lock people, it is relevant.
You better believe your buttons. I'm looking to Riptide lock people.
All
with
right,
this card.
watch out for green-blue wizards coming from a wheeler near you.
It's probably 5 color wizards.
And you're going to play a green, green, blue, blue card
Don't
and
put me
5-color
on
wizards?
5 color.
All right.
If
fine.
anything,
you
it'll
don't
be
need to play
4.
white.
Thank you. Well, I'll splash remind sensor.
Exactly.
Growth
It's free.
Spiral. 2 mana instant for a green and a blue. Draw a card. You may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Ben.
Card's great.
Yeah.
It's an explorer that can be pitched to Force of Will, no meme, and it's an instant.
You get to keep up counter spells in your counterspell deck.
I think
And
it's
if they don't
really
do
good.
anything, you explore.
Yep.
It's great.
Great.
Gyre Engineer, next up. 3 mana 1/1 for 1, a green and a blue for a Vidalcan Wizard, tap and add green-blue. I'm going to throw to Ben here because he added this one.
So there is you don't see it as much, but I really do think there's a meta call to be made whenever you're playing hypermana decks, be them Cradlehoof decks, be them any kind of deck that will play a Gaia's Cradle. And that's, you ask yourself how many Forked Bolts are kicking around, because there is enough 3 drops that add 2 mana that let you get to 6 real quick. For a while, actually, that was the default Cradlehoof build that I was playing. Once the deck picked up some more popularity and people were kind of prepared for it, and they were expecting, they kind of plotted out the turns in which the deck would usually go off or take off. And so being able to race against combo decks in your hypermana elf decks or whatever it may be is very important. And blue-green actually has 3 different versions of this, with this one being probably the best because it's not just adding colorless or whatever it may be, but you are up to enough that that deck can reliably go turn 1 dork, turn 2 the 2 mana dork, turn 3 pick your 6 drop.
Interesting. Cool. Next up, we have Droid Crisis. Got there, kind of. X, green-blue, gets you a 0/0 Jellyfish Hydra Beast. I like saying that, and the art is a balloon. Snake balloon. When you cast a spell, you gain half of X, and you draw half of X cards. Round down each time. Has Flample, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Jer.
There's been a bit of a debate as to whether this card's good enough to see play, and if it is, where it goes. I think it's reasonable in some big mana decks. I think the fact that it's a cast trigger is exactly what you're looking for on those decks.
Yeah, not an ETB.
Once you start just like entering the flunge your mana every turn phase of the game, this is exactly what you want. You want to get value no matter what, and counter spells are public enemy #1. And this is good against counter spells, so yeah, get it into your big mana decks. But you want to add anything, Ben?
Oh, I think this, I agree with that. I also think this card is like a slight upgrade, but I want to Genesis Hydra for like a Lurin or Food Chain decks, because this, I mean, this offers the same. If I'm going infinite with Food Chain, I just get to kill you. But playing this,
you get to kill them with Genesis Hydra. It's just hard.
Right. Well, what I mean is that like Genesis Hydra gives you access to your entire deck when you're casting it. So does this card, but I mean, I've cast a Genesis Hydra for, the fair Genesis Hydra in this format before, and, it's fine, but I think a fair Hydroid Crisis is going to be a nicer, just like a small little quality of life upgrade.
All right, next up, we have a spicy card. Let's talk about Prime Speaker Xanathar. 4 mana for 2, a green and a blue, gets you a 2/4 legendary Elf Ooze Wizard. Basically, hello to Birthing Blob. Tap, sack another creature. Search your library for a creature card with CMC 1 equal to or 1+ to sacrifice creature CMC. Then put that card onto the battlefield, shuffle your library, activate this ability only as a sorcery. Yes, Beej.
Is it Vanifar? With a V?
What did I say?
Xanathar.
Oh, I meant to say it with a V. Yes,
Cool.
Vanifar.
That's okay.
Vanifar.
Thank you, Beej. Ben, you have feelings. Tell me about this card.
This card's great. I mean, it's Birthing Pod on a creature, and we're not talking Yisan the Wandering Bard here. Well, this is real deal Birthing Pod.
Factual. It's actually better. Well, like its activation is better because
it doesn't cost
no
you mana
cost, no life.
Well,
so
I have a question for former and current council members. Is there any speculation that's getting pointed?
Absolutely not.
I doubt it.
Why?
It's a creature.
All right. No, good talk.
It is. I think it is worth commenting that I think that this card also opens up more experimentation with pod lists. One of the I've played a bunch of pod in the past couple of years. Jeremy's played pod in the past couple of years, and it's currently playing it right now as well, or in that kind of area. And I think that I'm guilty of it as well, is that when we're looking for pod lists, we get kind of stuck in our ways playing the good old fashioned kind of
We just messaged Pat, and we're like, yo, ship me.
Yo, what's your current list, Pat?
Right.
Yeah,
And
Pat pod.
And both Jeremy and I have spread out to different style of pod builds to varying levels of success, but have both taken down events with these greedy Jiki builds or the Hermit Druid kind of builds, that kind of stuff. And I think it's anytime that deck gets a new card, and especially something as powerful as this, I think it's worth taking another look at the colors you're playing, your pod chain, and just like how the tutors, the cards you're using to find this kind of stuff.
How often are you going to pod into plob, whatever we want to call this shorthand?
Almost never.
Well, like this card,
okay.
you can play this card in. So I was thinking, I had a shower thought about this card in Fate Stitcher, and then like going infinite with Fate Stitcher, up to like you get up to Kiki-Jiki, Fate Stitcher, and then you pod the final Kiki-Jiki into Great Oak Guardian, which is a 6-drop that untaps all your team, gives them +2/+2, and you're rubbing your head and you're saying, Ben, why won't you shut up about this? But Fate Stitcher happens to slide into Hermit Druid. And I think that this kind of thing, people will laugh at this kind of thing, being like, what are you talking about? This just sounds like you're making a deck worse. But this is how decks like Garbage Plate come to fruition.
It's a deck literally named Garbage.
Well, I mean, yeah, but
it's because it only looks like garbage.
It's a nice
One
pile of
man's
garbage.
Trash is
All right, so
Garbage has a couple of trophies.
in conclusion, Vanifar is amazing. Expect to see it in pod lists forever.
I just want to get one last thing. The fact that this card is not pointed gives fair decks the effect of pod without needing to needlessly pay points for it, which would be interesting to see how that goes as well.
Very cool. All right, next up, Zagana, Utopian Speaker. 4 mana gets you a 4/4 legendary Merfolk Wizard. Slide it right into your Merfolk Wizards now. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another card with a +1/+1 counter on it, draw a card. Adapt 6, 4 and a green and a blue gets you adapt 4. Sorry, adapt 4 but pay 6 is I should be more clear about. And each creature you control a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Jer.
I actually like this card. It's not that hard to get creatures with +1/+1 counters. There's lots of good creatures that just happen to get +1/+1 counters. I think the +1/+1 counters deck is actually getting closer to being real. And this card is a super good rate. It's a 4 mana 4/4, dodges most of the red removal. And if you get up to 6, it's an 8/8 that gives a bunch of your other stuff trample and has trample.
All right. Incubation, incongruity. How do I pronounce that? Incongruity. And I believe this is our second last Simic card. So the incubation side is a single mana, green-blue hybrid sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from amongst them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of the random order. Fine. Second side, Incongruity. 3 mana instant for 1, a green, and a blue. Exile target creature. That creature's controller gets a 3/3 frog.
Frog Lizard.
Frog lizard, pardon me. Ben. Ben.
Ben? I'm not super hot on this kind of card. Like, I have probably played more Pong of Fives than your average Magic player. And 3 mana in, like, adding green to it is kind of iffy. Like, you don't have the... I'm struggling to find a green-blue deck that wants to play both... that wants to play a Commune with Nature.
Yep.
Or that wants to play the Exile expensive Pongify.
Yeah.
And like for split cards, the nice thing about them is that you don't have to just judge one of the two sides. You can say like, well, you know, I might not play one of these, but if I put them together, it gives me enough flexibility to consider this. But I don't think these two sides really complement each other in the kind of decks that would want one or the other.
Right on. And our last Simic card is Repudiate and Replicate.
Hey.
Nailed it in one. First side, Repudiate. For 2 mana, green-blue hybrid gets you an instant. Counter target activated ability or triggered ability.
Stifle.
Kind of cool. And Replicate, 3 mana sorcery for 1, a green, and a blue. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. Jer.
I actually like this card.
Yeah.
I think getting like value stifles is good. If there's anything we've learned about Disallow is that like, and cards like Nimble Obstructionist, that like having reasonable stifle effects that aren't necessarily restricted to only doing that as good. I'm not certain if the other side is good enough to make it playable, but I actually think these types of effects are underexplored in Highlander currently.
I started out thinking this was pretty all right, and it's just kind of, I mean, it's nice to have another Stifle with some flexibility, and being able to cast this off green is kind of hilarious.
Oh, wow, yeah.
This might actually be in my top cards of the set. Slowly but surely it creeped up there.
What are you playing it in?
I'm excited to try this in blue-green Sorensen tempo. Other kind of blue-green X shells. I think you really want to get both sides of this. I mean, I might try this in Flying Men just to really stack up on some of the Stifles. Stifle's a great magic card. It's really hard to find. It's a hard magic card to use, but it's a great magic card. And I was just thinking about like these awkward turns of curving out, holding up this Stifle, and then just being able to cash it in and saying like, yeah, I'm fine with this. So you know, it's kind of like Shadow of Doubt. Like I feel like a lot of people can hold on to these cards for too long.
Yeah, you miss that window where it actually has an impact.
Or not long enough, right? It's genuinely quite hard to nail that down.
Yeah, there's some matchups where like that effect is just so important. You want to hold on to it and forever, like against Storm or whatever. Or when I'm on combo, I've had people like fire off Stifles on fetch lands, and I'm like, well, I was gonna lose to that later. Good thing they'd only got a fetch land.
But just playing like, I mean, you can. This is the not dream scenario, but like if you go like a Delver or Deathrite on turn 1, turn 2 you hold up counter magic with your Repudiate, and then you're just like, well, I didn't get a chance to use this, but I need to apply additional pressure.
Yeah.
Untap, copy your creature.
Yeah.
Or even just like
No. Only copy your own creature. You can't copy your opponent's
no,
creature.
that's what. That's
Yeah. Just to be clear though, just to be clear,
So
when we
like,
say your, who
yeah.
we're referring to.
Doubling up on your Tarmogoyf. If you're like, well, I just need to start killing my opponent.
Scoos,
it's
whatever.
great. It lets you dedicate another card to your deck that can. I think you can realistically qualify this as an additional threat, but also have this extra Stifle.
Word.
Yeah, I think this card's great.
All right, let's move on to Azorius. First card is a reprint. We've got Absorb. Absorb is a counterspell. You pay 1 white, a blue, and a blue. Counter target spell, gain 3 life. It's basically counterspell and healing salve together. Control player Jer, your thoughts?
it's great if you're playing blue-white X control. Get it in there.
All right. Next up, we have the Deputy of Detention. 3 mana, 1/3 Vidalcan Wizard for 1 a white and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls and all other non-land permanents that share a name until Deputy leaves the battlefield. Ben.
Well, Serge, again, you actually played a blue-white, low-to-the-ground, creature-y, tempo-y deck for quite some time.
I want to rebuild it.
Do you think this card would get into that kind of shell?
I do, because I'd give this a sword. I kind of want to rebuild the deck, and I want to put this in it.
I personally wouldn't play this in something like Jeskai, or even the blue-white, like, mid-range deck. But that's a little higher on the curve than you were.
Yeah.
So it's, I wouldn't play this in like the Bant ETB Blink deck either. It doesn't have the ability.
The cheaty thing.
Right. And just like a deck looking for this kind of effect, just a one of, like just play Palace Jailer. Or just play Council's Judgment.
Yeah.
But
I think this can have a really important tempo move, and if you've got a counterspell to back it up, like if you're playing this as well as any of the other low threats and 4 spikes and stifles and something, I think this could get you there.
yeah, slap a grafted war gear on this.
Oh
and go to
baby,
town.
yeah, Deputy's ready to rumble. All right, let's talk about another Planeswalker, or is this the spell? I'm not quite sure. Dovin, Architect of Law. Oh, this is from the. This is Ben. All right, Ben. We'll find out. All right, read this card off, and then tell me why you included it.
So this is technically from Ravnica Allegiance, though it's from the Planeswalker decks of Ravnica Allegiance.
Okay, 6
Dovin,
mana.
Architect of Law, 4 a white and a blue for a Planeswalker, Dovin. 5 loyalty. +1, you gain 2 life and draw a card. -1, you tap down a creature and it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. -9, tap all permanents target opponent controls, that player skips their next untap step. This card isn't the best Planeswalker in the world, but if you're looking for Planeswalker density in something like the Jeskai Super Friends decks or the Esper Super Friends, Bant, whichever ones that also just jams every time walk available, I would at least consider playing this card. In my opinion, it starts with enough loyalty. The first two abilities are some of the most real, like they're nothing flashy, but they're still a lot better than the ones that you've seen before on some Planeswalkers. And frankly, I think this card might actually be better than some Planeswalkers people already play today. The -9 is whatever, it's fine, but I don't really want to evaluate a Planeswalker on that.
Sure.
But like, I do genuinely think that this card could see some play, and I will make it my own personal goal to try and take down an event with this card.
Let's talk about the other Dovin then. Dovin Grand Arbiter, 3-mana Planeswalker, another one. For 1, a white and a blue, has 3 loyalty. +1, until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty on Dovin. Weird, but okay. -1, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature with flying. You also gain 1 life. -7, look at the top 10 cards of your library. 3 into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Jer.
I think this card is really powerful. It's a 3-mana Planeswalker. It has an ability that impacts the board all the time, which I like. It potentially gets a lot of loyalty with 1 uptick, which is kind of exciting. And its ultimate is like turbo dig through time. And dig through time is often good enough to win games by itself, and this is better than that. So.
I just want to say, of course, Dovin Architect of Law looks bad if you have this following it up.
Literally
This is
half
just a
the
better
mana
Dovin.
and all the abilities are better.
All right.
So, but different cards. This card's great to have access to. This like weird kind of. You could just play this and tick it down 3 times in a control deck.
You sure could.
And you're like, great, I just played this really good Spectral Procession that gained me 3 life.
Yep.
And the uptick is great, and the ultimate is kind of busted. You're probably winning the game if you get to do that.
Yeah, Ancestral with 10 card selection? Like, holy moly.
And you get to do it a lot quicker than I think a lot of people are going to see.
Yeah, it's...
Potentially the turn after you cast it, yeah.
Potentially the turn after, like at least the 3rd turn, I'd guess.
Also just artifact synergies.
Yep.
Like this makes artifacts and pairs with other artifacts and is white and blue. Maybe, you know, Memnites.
Yeah. No, I will probably play with this. I have some new decks I have to get brewing. Let's move on to Dovin's Acuity. 3-mana enchantment. This is information campaign instead of disinformation campaign. Jara's making a face. 3-mana enchantment for 1, a white and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, gain 2 life and draw a card. Whenever you cast an instant during your main phase, return it to its owner's hand. Jer.
Me?
You don't like this?
No.
Well, this is embarrassing. I thought you put this on the list, Serge, but it turns out it was me.
I was pretty sure it was you.
Oh, I'm familiar now. It's all coming. It's all flooding back. So I actually don't think this is that bad, but now that I realized I put it on the list. Well, it's so okay. The ability that it provides is a little clunky, but it's fine. I think this card. Okay, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This card's going to be a bit too clunky than I initially thought, and it's an important lesson to be able to admit when you're wrong, because there are several instances that a lot of people should probably just be playing during their main phase. Brainstorm, Swords to Plowshares,
Ancestral Recall,
Impulse, Ancestral Recall. So you will, if you so choose to play this card, chances are you'll be getting multiple uses out of this card, which is why I thought that, you know, maybe this gets a shot. Maybe you played an Enchantress as well.
It's like a set of training wheels. You put it in your deck until you're good enough at casting your instance in your main phase.
Now I've got Serge on my side here.
What instance are you playing in Enchantress?
Crop Rotation, Eladamri's Call, Argivian Find.
I don't know that one, but okay.
It lets you trigger off your Enchantresses multiple times, Serge, because you play it, you draw, and you draw.
Enlightened Tutor.
Enlightened Tutor on your main phase to get this back, to play it, to draw the card you Enlightened Tutor.
So we're on 4-color, no red here.
Okay.
Yeah. But it is good with Enlightened Tutor, because in response to the ability, you can Enlightened Tutor and then draw the card you Enlightened Tutor and it returns.
Gets back.
All right.
See, there's something.
Okay, there's a home for it somewhere. Let's move on, though. Emergency Powers. 7-mana instant for 5, a white and a blue. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into a library and then draws 7 cards. Exile Emergency Powers. However, addendum, if you cast this during your main phase, you may put a permanent with CMC 7 or less from your hand and onto the battlefield. Should I just throw this one to Ben?
Yes.
Well, you put this on the list, and you are surrounded by two people that play more draw sevens than most people. in
Yes.
this format.
I'd argue anyone.
And
but
draw
I've
sevens.
cast my fair share of draw sevens. This is like the team draw seven.
So then
here.
you're familiar with when draw sevens go bad, especially if an opponent holds up mana, because you as a combo player held up 7 mana and didn't do anything. So they're assuming, well, I got a turn off, so I'm just going to, they're top decking, I'm just going to answer whatever they do next. This card is too expensive. The white mana is
Awkward.
Yeah, it's awkward to say the least. And then putting a permanent doesn't do much. I've had
The
plenty
only
of...
thing I can think of is if you get to cast Paradox Engine for free.
I've
That's magical
I've
Christmas
had
land.
a lot of people say
That's
that.
magical Christmas land.
Yeah.
And that's not enough of a reason to cast this card.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll try it out, but I mean, me trying out a
understand,
card
yeah.
is no, doesn't really give anything.
You heard it right here, folks. Ben Wheeler endorses this card. 100% guarantee. If you don't like this card in your Highlander deck, Ben will buy it off you.
2019, Dovin Architect of Law, emergency powers. Let's go.
All right. Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. 2 mana 2/2. Gets you a legendary human soldier. Each opponent cannot cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. I'm putting this in the Azorius Low to the Ground deck I'm playing.
Yeah, I'm not as... I think this card's fine. People give this card way too much credit. They're like, oh, it's going to counter all these different things. And it's like, nah, I mean, it might stop one deck, but I would... If you came to me and be like, hey, Ben, I cut this card from my deck, I'd be like, yep,
Okay.
great. Or if you...
I think it's actively good against Storm and almost no other combo decks.
Which, time and time again, I think you'll find us telling people to not just sleeve up one card for one deck.
Yes.
I mean, this is an extract.
It hoses Mox.
Well, it's a bear. Yeah, that...
Who's holding Mox until turn 3?
I've done it sometimes.
The Storm deck?
It happens more than you think. But...
Sure.
It's at least a bear. So this
Yep.
makes it more justifiable than like Sadistic Sacrament
Yeah.
or Extract or
Yeah.
whatever.
All right, let's move on to Dispose, Deploy. Depose. I got a typo in there. Depose, Deploy. Depose is a 2 mana instant for 1 in Azorius. Tap target creature, draw a card. Deploy, 4 mana instant, 2 in a white and a blue. Create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter tokens and gain 1 life for each creature you control. Jer.
This card maybe sees play because ice is really good. I don't know.
Alex put this on the list. Alex is currently sick. I feel as though
Let's put
even if
ourselves
he
in the
were
line of
here,
Alex, yeah.
he would. The reaction to this card is what he's doing at home right now. This card doesn't do much. It's just so underwhelming to me. Both sides of it. Like ice is great, but like deploys no fire.
No, it's not fire.
Put that on a t-shirt.
It's like
deploys no
ice and ice.
Yeah, ice, baby. Like,
All right,
yeah,
fair enough.
I'm not sold on this card.
All right, let's talk about our last gold card on our set review today, the Warrant Warden. Instant Warren. I'd like split the difference between the two there. Warrant is a 2 mana instant for Azorius hybrid. Put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. Pretty good. Warden, 5 mana sorcery for 3, a white and a blue. Create a Sarah Angel.
Sarah Sphinx.
Sarah Sphinx, whatever. Ben, take us home.
I think this card's quite good.
Yep.
Both abilities are like having your removal spell, which is totally fine, and in a format with a bunch of fetch lands can cause for some awkward scenarios for your opponent. But just like being able to cut out their next draw with Warrant is fine. Azorius Charm has seen play.
Yep.
One of the
Lots of
upsides of Azorius Charm is that it has other modes. And instead of being able to cash in your removal spell that might be dead for a card, you're able to turn this into a Sarah Angel.
Possible
Now,
win con, yeah.
yeah, like Sarah Angel, I mean, I shouldn't say Sarah Angel isn't winning any games because there was that one evening with Big White and literal Sarah Angel, and I may have killed a counselor, but that's a different story for a different time. But Warden, I mean, it will come up where you will be able to make a creature and your opponent will be like, well, I'm going to lose to this 4/4 flyer.
I've won a surprising number of games with hard cast and treat the angels for 1, which
Yeah.
is exactly what this
Yeah.
is. So like,
Well, this is better.
Better.
Gives vigilance.
Yeah.
yeah.
Although
Intrigue
this
doesn't
does
have it.
die to Pyroblast.
Sure. All right, let us move on to an artifact, probably the only artifact we want to talk about today, Glass of the Guild Pact. 2-mana artifact, multicolored creatures you control get +1/+1. Is there a deck for this?
No.
Maybe in like 2 years.
Yeah, there's
Not
not
yet.
enough
Not
gold
yet.
cards right now?
It's a card that gets better every single set.
I've played it. I've played 5-color zoo with like 90% of the deck is spells in the deck are multicolored creatures, and I wouldn't play it in that deck. I think you need like multicolored go wide deck.
Well, it's
You need a way to
interesting 'cause,
create
like,
multicolored tokens.
White Weenie Go Wide plays all the anthems. It plays Crusade, which even buffs the other side. So I didn't know. It's worth having the conversation. If a monocolored Go Wide deck will play anthems, is there a gold deck that wants this?
The problem is like you don't have like tokens or 1-drops that are multicolored really.
All right.
Yeah, the white weenie decks
hard to go
that
wide.
still are casting Crusade and Honor of the Pure, they are able to, like, they're hyper aggressive.
Yeah.
They're playing like Isamarus and whatnot, and they are pooping out.
Suntail Hawks.
Yeah. And they're pooping out 1/1 tokens, a bunch. And those tokens all benefit from the anthems. And like Jared said, the tokens don't benefit from this anthem, and your 1-drops don't. Like, aside from, Figure of Destiny, there are 10
Dry
multicolored.
Militants.
There's like 9 playable,
Deathrite Shaman.
9 air quote
Your Death Ray
playable.
Shaman's a 2/3.
Look, I'm trying to make a blister coil weird joke here,
All right.
and it's not working out. Much like this card wouldn't work out in most Highlander decks.
Well, let's move on to the last cards that we want to talk about today. The new dual lands. For example, Godless Shrine. They are
New old.
Yeah.
the reprinted of the original Ravnica dual lands. Just in case people aren't familiar, the 5 are back. An example, Godless Shrine is both a plains and a swamp. It enters play tapped, or you can pay 2 life and have it untapped. Your thoughts, friends?
They're great.
Play
Every
them
deck.
Every deck.
Yeah.
Except for monocolored decks. But even then, maybe. If you're splashing.
Yeah. A little something on the side.
So, yeah, friends, that's going to be part 2 of our set review. Let us move now to our closing segment, Powerful Magic. And up today, it's me. And I want to tell a powerful magic story that happened not too long ago while I was down at PAX South. I was playing against a fan and viewer who has the username Vezin. And it started off bad. It started off really bad because you know what they decided to play against me?
What?
Blue Moon.
Oh.
A deck that I can't beat.
I thought you loved that deck, Serge.
Nope. I want to throw it into the sea. And you know what spell they resolved against me?
Blood Moon?
No. Madcap Experiments.
Oh.
You love that card, Serge.
I sure do. 4-mana sorcery. Put Platinum Imperium into play. And you know what it did? They put Platinum Imperium into play. But this time I was playing something a little bit different. And I had a little card that Ben knows and loves, Knight of Autumn in play. You know what I did?
What did you do?
Restoration Angel.
No, sorry, in hand, not in play.
Oh.
Yeah. I cast Knight of Autumn, and I killed that Platinum Imperium.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
You don't understand the significance of this. I'm free. The curse has been broken. I finally beat Blue Moon. This is the greatest moment in Magic history.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I really am proud.
All it took was changing what deck I played.
Go figure.
It made me really
To
happy.
defeat my demons, I just had to change
I had to
everything.
give up. I had to
Yeah,
give
give
up.
up.
But we got there. And it's the greatest moment of my Magic play in history. Thanks, Vezin. It was a really fun game. Honestly. So yeah, reminder that next Saturday on February 2nd, we're going to be playing Loading Ready Run is going to be hosting the local Victoria Highlander year-end tournament. Expect a whole day of powerful magic and commentary from the 2 of us and Alex, who's not here, but not Ben, because he was actually good enough to qualify.
But with Ben, just a different one.
I mean, hopefully.
Right. And our 4th host is going to be our good boy, Ben Ulmer, is going to be joining us. So look forward to our favorite plaid boy joining us for some high-energy commentary from the commentary booth. Yeah, that's about it today. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for the commentary and the feedback from episode 1 in the set review. If there's anything you think we missed, let us know down below in the comments. Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week with our hype for the tournament year-end review, and we'll see you then. Thanks.